Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Most of my comments will be around Dungeons and Dragons 5e and the campaigns I have run over the last 6 years, but some of it will be related back to things I did during Dungeons and Dragons 4e and some of the Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 games I have run. And I've also run quite a few games of Star Wars, not so much Star Trek and other role-play games, Fate, things like that, but I'm pulling from all of those resources. I would also like to say that a lot of the content in this video is taken from a very famous and well-known individual, Sly Flourish, and I will include a link to his article on how to build a home base so that you can go and check out that link. I have added in quite a lot of other stuff as well, but it's still a really good resource and frankly the inspiration for this video for today. So building a Dungeons and Dragons home base. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this. What I thought I would do is I would present you a whole lot of different images as I'm sliding my way through this content, and I want you to start picking out the things you like. And in the comments, you're going to type in what you like. So at the end, you sort of type in which one stood out to you the most. Okay? So here's a lot of fun and famous home bases or bases of operation for a fictional character or fictional characters. And I'm going to give you the following. I have about 10 different examples, and I'm going to lay this video out very differently. Normally you would explain the process and then give examples, whereas I'm doing this in the reverse because I feel like it actually makes more sense to go in the reverse. So I'm going to give you the examples, and then I'm going to explain near the end of the video how you would go about building the home base. Yes, let's see how that works for those of you who are still here. Okay, first off, let's talk about Superman's Fortress of Solitude. One of the things about the Fortress of Solitude, particularly when I first watched the original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve, is it's made out of crystals, and the technology behind it is very alien because Superman is alien. The temperature outside the Fortress of Solitude is cold because it's in an Arctic location, yet inside it's a comfortable temperature. The kind of technology inside there is alien, and it essentially is a living quarters and a workspace for Superman to do pretty much whatever he wants. And it's massive in scale. Those are some of the key elements behind a home base already, and you'll see the pattern starting to develop as we talk through a few more examples here, but still a really good idea. Okay, let's talk about Batman and the Batcave. The Batcave is a really good example of one, it's an interior location that's fairly sort of rough, it's natural in its formation, yet it has a whole lot of things added to it. And you can do the same thing in your game. Now, Batman has included a whole lot of technology for doing his research. He has a workshop for building his gadgets and other bits and pieces. He stores his Batmobile, his Batwing, his Batboat, and all the other vehicles that he drives and uses here. Any kind of special equipment is here. And as I said, all of his gadgets. This is a great home base. One of the differences with this home base is, compared to Superman's home base, which is the Fortress of Solitude, is he doesn't necessarily live here. His living quarters are situated above ground in a different location, but still its purpose is essentially very similar. Okay, let's talk about the Justice League's Watchtower or the Hall of Justice. The Watchtower is the one I want to focus on the most. This is essentially like a floating, not just a house, but like a town. It houses many different individuals. It is able to scan and check the environment around Earth and other locations further afield. So its ability to keep an eye, it's like a watchful eye, which is why it's called the Watchtower. But there's also a whole lot of other things like laboratories and workshops, gyms. Essentially, you could live there without too much trouble. The only thing you probably won't find there is a mall, which of course not necessarily high on your priority for building a home base, sticking in them all. Okay, what about the Avengers Tower? The Avengers use this tower, one, for all of the things that I've already talked about. Laboratories, workshops, living quarters, a base of operation, but it's also a place where they can land their vehicles. Whatever that might be, there's actually a platform on it. It also overlooks a major city so that they can see what's going on. It is full of a whole lot of different sensors that Tony Stark has put in there to make sure that they can keep an eye on the activities around the world. Again, very much like the Watchtower, the only difference is it's not positioned orbiting the planet. This one is actually on the planet. Let's go back in time a little bit. We all know the legend of King Arthur and Camelot. Now the thing about King Arthur and Camelot, it's not just the Camelot castle. You've got to understand with Camelot, what is associated as a home base for this is the round table with all of the knights of the round table who sit around there. That's very much part of the home base concept. The actual nation of people, all of the troops and soldiers that are part of Camelot all make part of that. And also there are the townships that surround the castle itself. There is the natural defences that have been put in place, whether they be a moat or a mountainside or a very narrow bridge to funnel any enemies along it so it's easy to deal with. It doesn't really matter, but its function essentially is the same like all the other things. You'll notice there's a pattern between a lot of these different home bases in that they have an element of isolation to them and borders that restrict access, and this is actually a really important feature to any kind of home base. Let's talk about Asgard. Now, one of the interesting things about Asgard, or Thor's home of Asgard, and that is it's a floating world. It's very advanced. It incorporates magic and science. It has the Bifrost, which allows them to travel to different worlds, which is one of the things that a lot of the other home bases I've talked about don't have. So that's a very important factor. It has basically a museum underneath the thing. We're full of artifacts that can be used to defend the place. It has its troops. It has the destroyer droid or robot that essentially seems almost indestructible and has a heat beam that shoots out of its head. It has secret locations where the people of Asgard can hide if they want to. So there's a lot of different things going on here as well, but again, that isolation factor and that security factor is there again. Let's talk about Doctor Who's TARDIS. One of my favourite TV shows was Doctor Who. I don't watch it so much nowadays, but one of the elements of the phone box, and that is really peculiar, is it's a very sort of mundane, normal thing you would see in a certain time in Earth's history, and yet when you look at it, it looks very small because what's going on inside is different. Inside, it's much larger. And inside you have your control centre, you have living quarters, you have workshops. In fact, nobody really knows exactly how big the TARDIS is inside, and the questions have been bound for a long time. But this thing essentially teleports to anywhere that the Doctor wants to go. It has security built into it. Not anybody can just walk into this thing. They will find it locked. You actually have to know how to open it. So again, isolation, security of some kind. Those of you who like Harry Potter, let's talk about Hogwarts School of Wizardry. Elements. It is part castle and part school. It almost looks like a fortification of some kind. It's positioned in such a way that it's hard to get at. What's interesting about it is it's protected by magic, and there are various things going on here. There are so many different wards going on. It also has its teachers who can cast spells. It has a slew of animated statues that can protect it. There are secret locations within it. There are places to sleep, eat, work, and research. There's a library. Just about anything you might need, you can find here. The only thing you probably can't find here is a marketplace, but chances are there are still even locations where you can grow your own food. although I suspect some of the food that's grown there is not necessarily the food we want to eat. So Hogwarts. Isolation again is a big factor, and security. Okay, Captain Nemo's submarine, the Nautilus. The great thing about Captain Nemo's Nautilus is Captain Nemo always said that they essentially lived on this thing. They could stay below the sea for years, and they did all of their farming on the seabed. This thing has all of its security features that you might require. It has sensors, it has places to live, it has places to sleep, recreation, preparing food. It has a location for dealing with any kind of weaponry, advancements in technology. There are libraries in this thing. That's how big and advanced it is. And the isolation factor is the fact that nobody really knows that it's there. It's below the surface. So it's essentially, in many respects, completely invisible to the outside world. The only way you would be able to find it is if you knew how to find it. And this thing is designed to not be found. And it's great for if you want to use it in a campaign where your campaign's mostly underwater. Okay, my last example is really, really famous. We all know Star Trek. And I thought I would talk about Star Trek. I was trying to decide whether I wanted to talk about Star Trek and Deep Space Nine, or I wanted to talk about Battlestar Galactica. But essentially, this is a mobile spaceship. It's a town. It has everything that a town would have. It has all the features for doing research as it travels from one world to another. It has that isolation factor. It has its protective shields. It has its weaponry to protect itself from anybody who's going to antagonize them. So it has all those features that make a really good home base. So those are my examples in terms of what you can sort of see from popular literature in terms of what a home base is. And you can see, I'm sure you'll have other ideas that you can plop in here, not just the ones I've presented. So here are a bunch of ideas for Dungeons & Dragons home bases that you could modify in your game group. Really? Is this the video on ideas for Dungeons & Dragons home bases? Actually, no. No, this isn't the idea video. This is to give you an idea of what people have done. The idea home base video is coming in the future. This is not that video. This is how to build your home base. And now that we've had a look at a selection of different home bases that people have used in the past from popular literature, we're going to start looking at some suggestions for your game group on how to actually build your Dungeons & Dragons home base for your players' characters so they will actually be invested and interested, and you will be invested and interested in doing it. So I have 12 things that I think sort of stand out in terms of building a home base that I want to discuss. The first one would be select some options the players like the idea of, not just the ideas that you like as the Dungeon Master. It's really easy when you're running the game to get caught up and think that the home base should be something that you thought up. And certainly you might be playing a big factor in that. But players will only take on board something as a home base if they like the idea. So you have to make it enticing. And if it's not enticing, there has to be potential for them to be interested in it. So don't go and decide that the home base should be something and then find that the players don't really want that. You need to be open to being flexible. They will select what they think is interesting as a home base. Okay, number 2 would be avoid the commonplace home base. You want to aim for something that's unique and fantastically unusual. If you just go with the common, we've got a cottage in the countryside, or a tavern, or you've got an inn, or just your standard castle, yes, that could be a home base, but it's not very enticing. And Sly Flourish talks quite a lot about fantastic locations and how to build them. And this is one of the really important things you need to remember. Commonplace is great for low-level play, and yes, they might be using those, but be open to them taking on something that's very strange and unusual. Remember, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's a game of imagination. You want to make your home base big. You want to make it ancient. You want to give it secrets to be discovered by the player's characters. This is how you make it impressive to your players. Size does matter. Making it ancient suggests to the players that, one, it's been around a long time, so it should still be around when their characters pass away. Giving it secrets means, well, that's essentially Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is about players finding out secrets. It's not just killing monsters, but secrets about locations has always been a huge factor. Remember, one of the 3 pillars is exploration. And so even if you have secrets for your home base and the players' characters don't know them now, there might be a way, and there should certainly be a way to find out in the future. They won't find out everything, but you will at least know them, and you should at least allow them an opportunity to pull that information out as the campaign progresses with their home base. Let's stick to being functional. Number 4 would definitely be, remember the functional side of your home base. Give it sleeping quarters, give it a dining room, give it a kitchen where they can prepare food, give it a washroom, heck, even give it a toilet. And how many times have you ever seen any location that includes a long drop or a toilet in your Dungeons and Dragons game? Is that sort of a no-go place? Maybe it is a no-go place, but make it functional. Give it a recreational area. Give it all the things that it really needs for it to actually make it a home rather than just a place where there's a big open space and nothing else going on. Now, these things they might have to build in to their home base over time, but there should be sort of spaces to allow for that somewhere. Number 5 is, does it have a perk or an advantage or a bonus to it? In other words, is there a form of travel? Does the home base actually travel from one location to the next? And there are different ways of doing that, flying, teleporting, whatever you want. Does it have libraries or a workshop? Libraries are great for wizards and scholars. Workshops are good for people who like to invent things. A gym for those of you who want to train. All of the fighter or martial characters will be very much interested in a gym. What about a swimming pool? Heck, put in a jacuzzi. Yes, that's right, put in a spa pool. Why not? What about the forge for those of you who have characters that want to actually make weapons and armor or shoe their horse? All those sorts of things. What about the clerics, those who have a religious bent? Give them a shrine, even a church. What about a zoo for those of you who have a character who's being played by a druid and they have an affinity with animals? Now, when I say zoo, you don't necessarily have to make it a cage. It could have a different form. It could simply just be like a reserve where animals can roam. What about a trophy room or even a museum or a place to store all of those things they don't carry with them because they aren't really necessarily particularly useful right now? Maybe they have cut the head off every single monster they ever came across and they have stuck them onto the wall as a proof that they have tackled that beast in the past. So give it all the perks and advantages and bonuses that players might be interested in. And if it doesn't have it, allow there to be room for those things to be added over time. Number 6 is, now you don't have to do this, but I suggest don't attack the home base and crush the player's feeling of safety. Here's the problem with attacking the home base. The idea behind the home base is that's a sanctuary, a place where they can go and feel comfortable and safe and they don't have to worry about their watches, and they've got a place where they can take a long rest and they don't have to worry about those things they were dealing with when they were in the wilds or in the dungeons or in the temples and the places they were exploring. Don't take that away from them if you can help it. I know it's very, very tempting and you think it's a really strong story point, but the worst thing you can do to undermining the interest in a home base is to attack it and then prove to the players that it's not worth hanging on to anymore, because clearly they can't stop anybody from getting in there. Number 7 would be players will want the base to have security systems. And this is going back to 6. So when they start talking about putting in security systems, they're going to go for things like magical wards, mechanical locks, reinforced doors, traps, alarm systems, whether they be mechanical or magical, force walls. They may even want some sort of scrying ability built into it. This is why I've given you the eye from the tower from Mordor. Okay, they might want to have some sort of escape route included just in case the base is attacked. Not that I'm suggesting you do that, but players will still be looking at that, thinking that dungeon masters will try to use that against them in some way. And maybe the players will want their characters to have some sort of self-destruct option. In the event that things go terribly wrong and they need to move on for whatever reason, they want to be able to destroy the thing and not leave it behind for somebody else to exploit and use themselves. So self-destruct is always quite nice too. Number 8 would be allow for an evolving home base. Let it evolve and change over time, such as increases in power or function. It doesn't necessarily have to get in more powerful, but maybe there are more functions that can perform. Maybe there's renovations to damaged areas or ruined areas that need repair because they have degraded over time. Or maybe there's the opportunity to do an upgrade where they can put on an extension to their existing home base that they didn't have there before. So remember, evolve and change when players want it to take place. Number 9, the home base can actually completely change in your campaign. It does not have to be the same thing. You can change it. You'll find that a home base at low level won't be quite as enticing at higher level, where the kinds of things they're doing at high level, jumping from plane to plane or world to world, traveling the astral sea, things like that, their home bases can change. Now that doesn't mean that the old home base is completely abandoned. It might be passed on to somebody else. They might still keep it, but they have more than one. I would not be surprised if you'll find that as you play higher in level, that your players will want at least 2 different home bases. One that is stationary and doesn't move around, and one that is portable that can move and transport itself around to make it easier for them to actually get from one location to the next. Because riding on a horse and walking everywhere gets a bit dry after a while and a bit frustrating. So you can change that up. So different bases, absolutely. Okay, number 10. Who will be the caretaker for the home base? Now there's lots of different options and lots of different ideas from pop culture, but the thing that you need to understand is I would let the players' characters select who they want looking after their home base. So out of all of the non-player characters or NPCs that you as the Dungeon Master present to them, there will be hopefully some NPCs they like and might invite back to their home base to look after it. Or they might pay to actually make sure it's kept up to scratch. But let the players decide those things. Don't necessarily build the caretaker, those people who, or things or creatures or monsters or whatever it is that are looking after the home base, don't necessarily hard bake them into the base itself. And you can include everything under the sun. There's no reason why they can't have a dragon looking after their home base. One of the best ways you can ensure that nobody will go anywhere near your home base is to have a dragon right there. Okay, and number 11, and that is create a story or history behind the home base's location, whatever it might be, and the individuals, people, creatures, whatever, who built this location that they're using as a home base. You want this there for the characters to discover. Why was it built? Now, you could leave a journal, you could leave paintings on the walls, there might be books that they can find, not necessarily in that location, but over time. They might have to do a bit of research, they might have to talk to other people who've been around that location. They might actually have to go and talk to the gods, for all you know, depending on how old it is. But there should be a story that you as the Dungeon Master know about the location and its history that you can pass on to your players' characters at some point in some way. And that does not mean that they need to be able to find out absolutely everything about it. Okay? You can leave a few things unknowable. That's always fine. Number 12, I feel is quite important, and that is, don't get married to the home base upkeep. That means the monetary cost, the coins, the money involved in maintaining the location. That's not really the fun side of doing anything. Only really worry about tracking that sort of stuff if players are interested in tracking absolutely every penny that goes into their home base. It is perfectly acceptable to decide on a cost for running or managing your home base for a period of 1 week or a month or maybe a year. Most campaigns and game time might take place over a year or a couple of years, and you go from level 1 to level 10 or level 1 to level 20, whatever it might be, and then you're all done. So you only have to figure out one cost for the whole thing if you're actually going to track it. And all they do is, as they pay it off, you just tick off a bit more. But again, it's not something I would worry about focusing on too much. The concept behind the cost of managing it is not necessarily the most fun thing. Now, I know there are some dungeon masters who feel that they must do that. If you feel you must do that, that's fine, but I'm not going to recommend that to you. I'm going to recommend what I think is going to work for the players and for most people, and certainly myself, because I am certainly more interested in how it works for me than I am in necessarily everybody's view on how it should be done. Okay, now I've already given you a whole bunch of ideas. I've given you 12 different aspects to building your home base. Those are just the nuts and bolts of it, of how to do it. That doesn't necessarily give you the ideas. These are suggestions. These aren't burned into concrete, okay? If you don't agree with them, then don't use them. I've made it clear in the past in my videos that I'm more about options than I am about you have to do something a particular way, and if you don't do it that way, you're a bad dungeon master. That's not really where I'm at. Now, if you are interested in other videos I have done, I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters covering every aspect of the game. I have a bunch of videos on fantastic locations, not a lot, but a couple of them. I have a series on the Lost Mine of Phandelver. I have one for Dragon of Icespire Peak. I have one for Curse of Strahd, all of which you could, if you wanted, have a home base somewhere in there if you wanted to. Any campaign can have that. If you like what I've done today and you want to support me, then I have a Patreon page where you get access to the written copies of my videos, the live stream, so you don't have to worry about having your notifications turned on, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. I also have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, where you can buy stuff online and I get a small commission. I have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos if you are interested. And if you can't sort of find any way to do it that way and you still want to support me, watching my videos and watching some of the ads, don't watch anything longer than 30 seconds, because I never do. That always helps too, because I get a bit of money from the AdSense revenue. Not a lot, but a little bit. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. More important, make sure you subscribe, because so many people are not subscribing on my channel. Make sure to turn on the bell and the notifications if you want to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.